Welcome to this Hope to Go. Today we're talking about off the chain, living a life off the chain. Do you know our perspective in life determines the direction that we go? But for most of us, that perspective is limited. That view is skewed. That vision is impaired. And because of that, we chain ourselves up to a boatload of fear and a lack of trust. But God has so much more in store for us. On this Hope to Go, we find out just what it takes to gain a God perspective on our lives, and we see that by living a life of faith and obedience, we can discover just what it means to live off the chain. Now, there's a miracle in Luke chapter 5, verse 1 through 7, that starts with a problem. We've got Peter, and this is when God first comes into his life, and he's been fishing all night, and he's caught nothing. But something is about to change. It all ends in a blessing in Luke chapter 5 and verse 6, and it says, their net began to break for a large catch of fish. Now, let me give you some Hope to Go truth to get you off the chain. Number one, you got to invite Jesus into your boat. Luke 5:1 says this, and the New Living says, one day as Jesus was preaching on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, a great crowd pressed in on him to listen to the word of God. Did you hear that? He noticed two empty boats at the water's edge, for the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. People were pressing in on Jesus just because they wanted to hear the word of God. And people are tired, I believe, today in Canada of the opinions of men. The word of God is a statement about your future and my future. It's creative. And when we invite Jesus into our boat, he brings life. John 10:10 says, the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy, but I have come that you might have life. When we allow the power of the Word of God to operate in our lives, there will always be supernatural results. And number two, B, obey the Word of God. Luke 5:4, it says this, when he had stopped speaking, Jesus is now teaching, and he said to Simon, launch out into the deep and let down your nets. This is what he said, for a catch. But Simon answered and said to him, Master, we've toiled all night and caught nothing. Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net. That's singular. He said plural. And when he had done this, they caught a great number of fish, and their net was breaking. Did you get that? Jesus commanded Simon Peter to launch into the deep. And Peter has every reason in the world, in the natural, not to obey. As a professional fisherman, he knew that Jesus had knowledge in carpentry, but not in fishing. Peter and his crew of expert fishermen worked hard all night and gave their best shot and came up empty. The good news is their disappointment became God's appointment. Simon said, nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net. And when Peter obeyed, it led to a net-breaking experience. I believe God's going to do that with you. Luke 5:6 says their net was breaking. And this is the last thing. Share the word of God. Luke 5:7 says, so they signaled to their partners and the other boats to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink. This return on the fishing trip went from zero to hero. Peter starts waving frantically because he is now in a place, and I believe that's going to happen to you because you're going to get off the chain. Invite Jesus in the boat. Obey the word of God, but share the word of God and see the blessing come. And that is your Hope to Go.